This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
A lot going on this Monday. We, of course, have a 6-game NBA slate as they start to ramp up towards the playoffs as we are now into March, but also NFL Combine has wrapped up and a lot of key reporting out of the Combine. Obviously, we're not going to take away a lot from a betting perspective from the testing numbers, but the reporting could be impactful. With divisional markets now up at FanDuel Sportsbook, we're going to talk to Ryan Williams, getting his read on both of those things, tonight's NBA slate and key takeaways from the NFL Scouting Combine as we dig in to FanDuel Sportsbook's odds for today. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, fun night on tap for tonight. Both looking back at the the NFL Combine and looking at a 6-game NBA slate. How you doing today?
Is it a fun one, Jim? I mean, we got a weird one coming up on this 6-gamer with some back-to-backs and stuff. But no, anything will be better than Sunday with the Warriors blowout, with the Celtics, just not fun. And it has been a fun NBA season in general, and especially after the All-Star break, you can really tell that some of these teams are ramping it up, especially the young teams there in the West. So no, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I'm really excited to dive into the slate with you. A lot of injury news that's affecting the slate from the early games. So definitely something that we want to monitor here early, but it is nice when we have some of these early locks, especially on a 6-game slate, so that we only have to worry about a couple games later on.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I have you here, because I have no idea if it's a fun slate or not. This is why I got Ryan
right.
Williams in my corner to tell me, hey, this slate kind of sucks. So this is actually beneficial for me. And, as a slowly being more okay with being a Wolves fan person on my end, seeing the favorite by 14, it's okay. Maybe that's tainting my view of this slate and slanting things in that direction. So we'll talk to Ryan to get his read on tonight's slate and then talk some NFL. We'll talk about potential Kirk Cousins landing spots and what that could mean here later on today. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. We are here 5 days per week, every single week on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Just search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also find the show on the FanDuel YouTube page and over on FanDuel TV Plus. Right, let's begin things by talking about the NBA. As mentioned, it's a 6-game slate here. So some wonky spreads, as you mentioned, some back-to-backs as well. Let's start things off with the traditional markets. Any spreads, totals, or money lines that stand out to you for tonight?
Yeah, so from the traditional market standpoint, I really feel like the lines where they opened up for this slate are absolutely perfect, or I guess have been adjusted since they've opened. Some look ahead lines have really, kind of been wonky. I was looking at the Clippers when they were at 5.5, just a 1.5 over that kind of magic number of 5 in the NBA, as most games tend to land on that number. The Clippers are on a back-to-back, but they have been pretty good straight up on back-to-backs this season. They're 4-2 on back-to-backs for whatever reason. This team gears up. And listen, the Clippers are looking at their future and knowing that things, are coming into fruition as far as we're a month away from when the playoffs are going to be starting. And so this is a huge opportunity for them, to kind of take it to the former coach of the Clippers, Doc Rivers here with the Bucks, who have been absolutely incredible since the All-Star break. We kind of talked about them and their future odds leading into the All-Star break, and the Bucks have really got it coming together. But this would be, definitely a big win for the Clippers, even if they were to keep this game close, to be able to kind of get the haters out of there. So I am looking at the 5 there for the Clippers that they are getting. I also think the Washington Wizards getting 6. We're not going to have Lauri Markkanen for this game. We're not going to have, there's Walker Kessler is questionable for Utah. And the Wizards have been so tough to trust, especially from a betting standpoint, to be able to get in on them. But with so many key pieces missing there, like this is a time where, Advia and Kuzma and Poole off the bench, Tyus Jones, like they could really get something going here in this fast-paced matchup. We're looking at that 240 number, and I don't actually necessarily hate that number of 240 going over just because of the way these two teams play. And the Wizards are just going to keep getting shot after shot after shot up. Definitely like looking that way. The early games are tough, Jim. We got a 14-point spread, like you mentioned, with Minnesota going against Portland. That number being close to 15, it's actually been bet down. So the spread has kind of closed the gap. I believe it was right around 14 and a half, maybe 15 initially. And so, you definitely look at that with the Timberwolves on the back-to-back, just hard to trust Portland. And then the Memphis and Brooklyn side of things, like 208 is such a low number in today's NBA. But I'm willing to go under on this. I mean, the Grizzlies and Nets just played last week. The Grizzlies couldn't even get to 90 points. I believe their team total is right around 99 and a half points for tonight. I'm actually looking at, potentially taking that under just because without Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jaren Jackson Jr. played in that matchup when these two teams faced last week, and he won't be out there. This Memphis Grizzlies team is just, they're putting it together with pieces that are kind of just feel like quote unquote off the street. Anybody who makes it into the NBA, you got to respect them, but it just doesn't seem like they are a well put together NBA team at this point. And that's what that spread is. And honestly, with the new coach there for the Brooklyn Nets, since he's come in, the Nets have actually been taking care of business, and we like their chances, even without Cam Thomas being in the lineup. So the spread kind of worries me a little bit, but I'd definitely be looking at an under there.
So that's a 208 right now for the Grizzlies and Nets, potentially looking at an under despite the fact it is such a low total in that one. Wanted to go back here to the Clippers and the Bucks game. You mentioned that was 5.5. It's now down to 5. How much value is there left to squeeze on this one right now? If it were to get to 4.5, would that be a situation where you would be jumping out and no longer interested in the Clippers? Or do you just think they're the right side in this game, willing to bet this down to potentially 4.5 if it were to get there?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from a money line perspective, Jim, that's what makes it kind of intriguing because even with that number being at 5, the plus 172, not quite at the 2-1 that you would normally expect. But again, it's the Clippers. I think they're just getting a lot of respect from that market. If it did come under the 5 number, yeah, I would probably be looking at the Milwaukee Bucks side, especially with it being at home. These two teams, I believe, are facing again maybe later this week or early next week. I believe it's in 3 games or so for the Clippers. So they'll have that home matchup to be able to get revenge on, and we could definitely be looking at that depending on how this game goes. But yeah, the 5 number is just so key that if we were to go under it, I'd probably be out on the Clippers at that point.
Okay, so interest in the Clippers plus 5, potentially the money line at plus 172, the Wizards plus 6, and then the under for the Grizzlies and the Nets. That is at 208, and it just went back to 5.5. So rest assured there on the Clippers and the Bucks, you can still get that 5.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. What about player props? Any of those stand out to you for tonight, Ryan?
Yeah, so if we're talking about player props, I'm going to go back to my card here and just pull it up. I mean, the Washington Wizards and Utah game, like anytime we have a total that is around 240 or higher, and especially you guys expected to miss, this is always going to be one of the first places I go. When we're looking at Denny Advia, his over 14 and a half points, I absolutely love. You're getting minus 108 on that number. It might even get, we might even get plus money to him as we get closer to lock, because we kind of know who the usual suspects are going to be. Taylor Hendricks for the Utah Jazz is probably, he's been getting spot starts already, but without Lauri Markkanen being out there, I believe his rebound chances are going to be, pretty raised there. And so when you're looking at his number at over 7.5 rebounds at plus 102, again, I expect a ton of shots to be up in this game. So probably a lot of rebound chances, and just getting plus money on that number is interesting. Even John Collins, he's at 10.5 right now, but that's plus money. I think that these bigs are definitely going to have to show up tonight for Utah to have chances and have possessions. We got to wait to see what the backcourt is looking like for For the Utah Jazz, as Jordan Clarkson's been missing some games, but I definitely would have some interest in him if those lines get released, just because of what we're expecting from that game. When we look elsewhere, I'm going to pull this up real quick. The other one that I was looking at in the Portland and Minnesota game, with Minnesota being on the back-to-back, is the points total on Anthony Simons. We've seen this kind of fluctuate already this morning. I believe it was right around 20, maybe 19 and a half. Now it's at 20 and a half at minus 115. Still like that number. This guy has been really tough to kind of trust in a vacuum. It seems like, he just came off a 30-point game. And when he has big games, he tends to not show up in the previous games. But this is going to be a game where it should be a higher pace for Portland. But he's honestly been the only one that you can be able to trust, and probably why we only have the prop market open for Anthony Simons at this point, because Jeremiah Grant hasn't been showing up. DeAndre Ayton hasn't been able to suit up the past couple of games. And if the Trailblazers want any chance of staying in this game, keeping it close, potentially winning this game, I believe it's going to come off the heels of Anthony Simons. So I absolutely love getting him at 20 and a half tonight.
Yeah, it's a 20 and a half. And right now the over is minus 115 on that. And you mentioned the inconsistency with Simons. That's definitely been the case when you dig into his most recent game logs, but there are some spike games in there. Do you have any consideration to going with an alternate market here for Simons? 25 plus points is plus 210. It is a tough defensive matchup. The Wolves have some great defenders out there as well. Or do you think that that's kind of why you're shying away from the alt markets, sticking with the traditional market at 20 and a half?
No, yeah, 20 and a half is kind of where I really like that number. But yeah, when we go to 25 points, you're getting 2-1 on that. Like, yeah, there's some interesting merit in there. You're looking at Anthony Simons. He's actually played against this team before and has not hit over the 20 and a half number in either one of these most recent matchups. However, he did take 15 shots and 19 shots respectively, and took 8 threes in one game and 10 threes in the other. So when I'm looking at that over, if I'm looking at that alternate total, like, let's get in on the action on his made threes as well to be able to parlay those two together. He's kind of, a heat check type of person. That was the case when he was kind of backing up the guys of CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard when they played in Portland as well. So his over 3.5 number on threes is plus 120. To be able to parlay that is nice. But yeah, when we look at the alternate market, 4 threes, 5 threes is plus 300. Even if you get to 6 threes, that's 7-1 on that. So, for him to be able to get to those points, he is a shooter. He's right. Not somebody who's going to take it inside most of the time. So yeah, that's where we can really get action on these alternate markets and making it, make it interesting. Don't have to go the full unit, half a unit, a quarter of a unit, would still be enticing to be able to get on some of those.
Right. Good way to think about things, kind of deciding which market to take advantage of some volatility with Simons, whether that be alt market for total points or looking at the made 3 categories. Mentioned over 3.5 made threes is plus 120, but then 5 plus made threes, 3-1, and then 6 plus made threes is 7-1 as well. Other prop that Ryan mentioned, Taylor Henderson or 7.5 rebounds plus 102, and Denny Adiva over 14.5 points, which is minus 108. Let's talk some NFL right now, Ryan, because as mentioned, we had the combine this past week. And again, not going to take a lot away from the testing numbers. We will later on once there are more draft props up. But I think the biggest takeaway from this combine was a lot of buzz about the Atlanta Falcons' odds to land Kirk Cousins. Sounds like the Vikings are bracing as if Cousins may not be able to re-sign with them. The Falcons aggressive in the veteran quarterback market, be it with Cousins, Baker Mayfield, guys like that. They're currently plus 150 to win the NFC South. Is that number tempting to you, or do you want confirmation on Cousins making the leap before you decide to invest in the Atlanta Falcons?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jim, because as we were going into this and we were talking about this before, I was actually interested in possibly taking this number at 150. Was so much kind of up in the air and not really sure what the state of the NFC South looks like. And then we're talking here, and as we're talking, we get the news that Mike Evans resigns with the Bucs, which Baker Mayfield back to the Bucs. Yeah, Baker Mayfield back to the Bucs. What was not a foregone conclusion. And I do think, a lot of what we think about the the NFL kind of state of where things are and where landing spots should be and this and that changed when we figured out the cap number was going to be that 15% higher than what we originally thought. So a lot of these teams are able to, are the Chiefs able to get L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones now, and all these other things. It makes things a lot more easy. So with the Bucs getting Mike Evans back, I think that there's a good chance that they re-sign Baker Mayfield, and now at 2.5 to 1, like the Bucs are still intriguing to me. So without getting that news on the Atlanta Falcons, like it does make it tough. Like Atlanta just has so many options. Like are they going to trade, for Justin Fields with the Bears? Are they going to try and draft one of these quarterbacks? It's like there's so much up in the air that 150 doesn't feel that great. And also, Jim, like to answer your question just tenfold, this is a market where like we should be taking long shots at this point because things change so much throughout the course of the season. Like there's so much overreaction that happens within the first weeks of the NFL that I hate having favorites necessarily in these markets unless I'm really sure that the number is like only going to change in a drastic way toward the other side. So like, not to just bounce around from your question, but like a team like the Rams, who's 420 to win the West right now, as people are picking them potentially to make a Super Bowl as their window like is dwindling, and we know that McVay just went back there. Stafford, is he going to be healthy for another year? Like Puka's coming into his fold, but do they bring more pieces in on defense? They have a first round pick for the first time in like 7 years or whatever the case may be. Like it's just insane. So like these are the long shots that I want to take. Also the New York Jets at being close to 3 to 1. Like, do we forget that Aaron Rodgers is potentially going to come back? Like he's not going out into the sunset after the way that last season ended. And so the best thing that I like to do at this point in time is to take some of the long shots in this market and have those tickets to where I'm looking at it where, during the season, are these going to be favorites at any point in time? And we're going to be wanting to hold those tickets.
Yeah, Baker or Mike Evans re-signing with the Bucs, according to Adam Schefter, 2-year, $52 million contract. Their reporting had been that Evans wanted to test free agency for the first time in his career, but decides to run it back with the Bucs, probably his final contract for that 2-year deal. We'll see if Baker goes back there, but I want to go back to this NFC South because I agree with you. I think honestly, Ryan, if you had told me right now that okay, Kirk Cousins 100% signs with the Falcons, would you take 150? And I would hesitate still. I had talked on this show before the combine about some things I wanted to watch. And one of I think the biggest question as far as like betting markets was, where does Kirk Cousins go? Because if he goes to Minnesota, they could be viable in the NFC North. If he goes to Atlanta, they could be viable in the NFC South. But then you see this market and see that they are like decently favored because they're plus 150. The Buccaneers are plus 250. And like, if you guaranteed me right now that Cousins is there, I still don't know if I would take plus 150. And it's not a guarantee that Cousins does go there either. So I'm on board with you where like, I want to buy into the Falcons because I think that they have good playmakers. They've got a defense that made pretty big strides last year as well, but the market wants to buy into them more than I do, which means I just can't do it. And that kind of bums me out, honestly, because I thought I want to take advantage of the fact that I think Cousins is better than given respect for these kinds of markets, not for like winning Super Bowl markets, but like, I don't think I can with where the market currently is.
No. And yeah, I mean, that's, again, this is where it becomes fun though, Jim, is like, okay, so let's say that Kirk Cousins lands in Atlanta, right? And so like if we are thinking that they're this heavy of a favorite, like if Atlanta's this much better than all the other teams in the NFC South, they're making the playoffs, right? And so now we think about like, okay, so like what does that mean record wise when they have to play Tampa twice, New Orleans twice, Carolina twice, and we start looking at the schedule, like do we then look at the season awards market and it might sound gross, but like where's Kirk Cousins at? And that he's 40 to 1 right now. So like am I going to take a chance on, the 150 for them to win the division at this point when the number could fluctuate during the season? Or let me get the 40 to 1 right now on Kirk Cousins, as gross as that may seem on paper, quote unquote, to people. But like that number is only going to it's only going to get better, especially with him being not on a team right now. Like if he lands to Atlanta, that number is just going to increase just because people are going to be thinking about Kirk Cousins and now think about that picture. So let's take some of these long shot bets now and have those tickets that are hanging out there for the season.
Yeah. Cousins 40-1 to win MVP. Interestingly enough, shorter than Jared Goff, who is 50-1. I think Goff might get purdied if he were ever close, where they're like, oh, we'll find someone else to give it to. So I understand why Goff is that long, but I do find it interesting given how high the sentiment is around the Lions that he's that long. I would not bet Goff at that number, but I do find it at least interesting how far out there he is. Lamar Jackson 12-1 to win it again. Herbert 13. Yeah. I think this is a good spot to look at the season awards markets. I don't see anything that stands out to me right now necessarily, but that could be the alternate route to betting the Falcons at plus 150. If you think that they play well, maybe Cousins benefits from that and could wind up finding himself in the MVP discussion. You've alluded to the Rams, the NFC West. You've alluded to some MVP markets. Any other futures you want to grab now with free agency, the legal tampering period being now 1 week away, Ryan?
Yeah, so I did mention the Jets as well too. Like I am going to be looking at the Jets, just playing in that division. I understand Miami, Buffalo, like that. Definitely tough teams, but this was a team a year ago that once they landed Aaron Rodgers, it was go 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 for this team, and what are we doing now? Sleeping on them? We're waiting for him to come back from injury, but Joe Burrow the same way. And this is an MVP caliber player that we're talking about. Not caliber, the dude's won multiple MVPs, and the Jets just aren't getting respect. And this is a team that could really they're going to probably show up things on the offensive line for Aaron Rodgers. They could go out and make another splash play on the offense. Are they bringing in Devontae Adams? Are they going to bring in another wide receiver? I know Mike Evans was talked about potentially being on the Jets. So I do think that there are still moves to be made for the New York Jets that are going to increase their numbers. So I want to make sure that I'm ahead of the curve there with them. In the Super Bowl market, not too many things stand out. I wish Cincinnati's number was just a little bit better because I do think that they have some merit to them at 15-1 there. But, still could be potentially interested in that. Honestly, as crazy as it sounds, kind of interested in the Houston Texans. They're going to get healthier on offense. They have the quarterback in CJ Stroud. Thinking about these guys who are on rookie deals right now is definitely the exciting, way to kind of take them, as that's kind of been the notion that we've been seeing for success in the Super Bowls outside of Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady. But yeah, I mean, it's such a fun time to get in on some of these long shots right now as we see fit. Even in the season awards markets, MVP might seem you might not want to dabble there, but we do have the offensive player of the year market up. We have the defensive player of the year market up. I would love to see what comeback player of the year is going to be, because I think there's so many, especially from a quarterback position, so many guys that are coming back that definitely make it intriguing. In the offensive player of the year market, Jim, if we're going to be talking about, the Jets, I'm looking at Garrett Wilson at 50-1, to be here. He was going to be the guy, if they do bring in somebody, sure, maybe that could potentially be dead, but let's say they don't bring in another receiver and he's just the alpha getting peppered. That could be really incredible for him and his upside. And this was the guy who people were talking about last year to potentially be the wide receiver one paired up with Rodgers. So when we're looking at that market, that's an interesting one as well.
I think his teammate Breece Hall is also pretty interesting, 40-1. Given the usage he saw last year in the passing game, if you pair with Aaron Rodgers, that could be kind of fun. So yeah, it's fun to look at these markets right now and see if we can find some value potentially in some long shots around there. But we're going to have Ryan back on next week, talk about free agency takeaways. That is going to be a whole lot of fun. Ryan, I'm looking forward to that. Good luck to you with the NBA slate for today. Hope it goes well for you. We'll talk to you once again next week. Talk some more NFL free agency.
Yeah, can't wait, Jim. It's been a fun ride, and don't ever hesitate. Hit me up in the DMs if the NBA slate's looking ugly for you. As you know, I'm always in the streets.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. I will happily take you up on that offer. That is Ryan Williams. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Again, we'll get him back on here next week, talk about NFL free agency takeaways. We're going to go through and recap recommendations from last week here on the show in just 1 second. But first, get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit the FanDuel app and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and Vermont. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's recap now recommendations here from last week on the show, beginning with EPL. We talked to Austin Cass, a senior editor for FanDuel Research, to get his read on EPL Match Week 27. Find Austin Cass on Twitter at Austin Cass. 1-4 week for Austin. The first one being the Bernardo Silva to score or assist prop. That was for Man City versus Man United. Man City did get the win, 3-1, but Silva not involved in any of those, so no win there for Silva. 2 recommendations for the Tottenham versus Crystal Palace match. First one was the Tottenham first half money line at -110, and Tottenham got blanked in the first half, which was concerning given that the other bet was Tottenham over 2.5 goals at +158. But Tottenham put on a second half clinic and did surge back to get the win there. They scored 3 goals, so a +158 winner for Tottenham over 2.5 goals. Austin had the Everton money line at +105. Everton unable to get the victory there. And the final one was Ivan Toney to score or assist at +135. Toney held off the score sheet in this one. Now has scored or assisted in 4 out of 8 matches since returning from his suspension. So couldn't get the win there with Toney. 1-4 week overall for Austin. Find him on Twitter at Austin Cass. We had Sam hopping on to preview the Formula One race in Bahrain, which was this weekend. And Sam did hit on Max Verstappen at -115 to win the pole and the race. Verstappen did not have the fastest time in qualifying. Actually, Charles Leclerc had that, but that time came in Q2, not Q3. So Verstappen did win the pole and coasted to a 22-second victory. So win for Sam at -115 there. Also had Charles Leclerc to podium at -105. Leclerc did qualify second and was fast, but then had some issues with his car during the race. His teammate Carlos Sainz able to get past him. Sainz finished third. Leclerc finished fourth. So no podium for Leclerc at -105. Final one for Sam, also subject to some car troubles. That was Alex Albon top 10 at +220. Albon didn't have the best car by any means, but would have been at least in contention for points had it not been. It sounded like his car engine was a bit sour throughout the race. The Mercedes power units had issues. Both for them and for the actual Mercedes team as well. So couldn't get the Albon top 10 at +220 there. Find Sam Hoppin on Twitter at Sam Hoppin and check out his work over at Betting Pros. For NASCAR on me, in the Cup Series, only bet I had for the Friday show was Denny Hamlin 10-1 to win the race. Toyota was fast, but Hamlin was not the fastest Toyota. That was actually Tyler Reddick, who came in second behind Kyle Larson. I thought Reddick might have a chance to the win. Reddick was in the betting guide over at FanDuel Research, but came up a bit short. Larson did a great job in that final stint of aero blocking Reddick, so Reddick could not get the win there. And no win on Hamlin at 10-1 for us. In Xfinity on Saturday, depends on what number you got John Hunter Nemechek at. Because when we talked on Friday, I said I showed value on him at +350, but I wanted to wait until after practice and qualifying to see what number I could get because it felt a little bit short at that time. Nemechek did lengthen post-practice and qualifying. I think he was around 450, somewhere in that range. But Nemechek did win. The model had confidence in him based on how fast he was, 1.5 miles last year, and Nemechek ran really well. His entire team was very fast. Chandler Smith was the other fastest car during that race, so Depends what number you got Nemechek at, probably 450, somewhere in there, but he did win in this race. Other recommendations for Xfinity were Eric Almirola 14-1 and Sam Mayer 18-1. Almirola, honestly, very underwhelming, I thought, throughout this race. Wasn't very fast on Friday and practice and qualifying. Never really inched into the top 5 during the race either. So disappointed there, given how fast both Nemechek and Chandler Smith were on his same team. And Sam Mayer, 18-1, had issues very early in this race and did not finish. So no win for Sam Mayer there. Friday in the Truck Series, I had Christopher Bell 6-1 to beat Kyle Busch. And Busch did have issues. So like the thesis of Busch's overvalue did play out, but Bell was not the benefactor. Christopher Bell did finish 5th in this race, but not really up towards the front. Rajah Caruth ran a great race and got his first victory in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I think the key takeaway for me was that I should probably treat the Spire trucks effectively as if they're a Kyle Busch Motorsports truck, because that's the team they bought last year. A lot of the employees are the same. So going to be shifting the priors on Rajah Caruth, Chase Purdy, when Kyle Busch is in that truck, to up the equipment of Spire, because Rajah's a very good driver, but this is a new level of performance from what he had last year. So I think those might be effectively Kyle Busch Motorsports trucks. So going to treat Spire that way going forward based on what we saw out of Rajah Caruth there. Congrats to him on the win. Really fun to see him get that victory, but no win on Christopher Bell at 6-1. That's all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread, but we are back with you once again tomorrow and throughout this entire week. So make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and check us out on FanDuel TV Plus and the FanDuel YouTube page. Big thank you once again to Ryan Williams for joining us. Check him out on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis and find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets across Monday. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.